Albert Breer, good to see you, sir, from the MMQB.com.
Absolutely, good to be here.
So the poll question today is brought to you by TrueCar. If you're ready to buy a new car, download the TrueCar app. Just configure the new car you want, see what others paid for it. Lock in guaranteed savings from TrueCar certified dealers. It's that easy. Save time and save money. Download the TrueCar app today. The Rich Eisen Show app is how you can vote on this poll question, as well as call the show, get all the videos you need. Our Twitter feed's on there. You can listen to the show live. You can get our podcast from there as well and vote on this poll question. Brockman, go for it.
If you're Anderson Varejao, would you accept a Cavs championship ring? Right now, 80% say no.
I'm with them, too. But
really?
I know you said yes. But, I mean, think about it. He's got to go back into the locker room in Golden State and show that bling off? Or everyone in there knows that he's accepted that bling? Because, Breer.
Well, you got to put you can't wear it around.
Well, but even accepting it is.
You probably just take it and put it in a safe deposit box or something.
Even accepting it, they know that you've taken it. You can't do that. You know, and hold on a minute.
But Kevin Durant just joined the team that beat him.
I get it. That's a different story. He's not still around with Oklahoma City.
Varejao's at the end of his career. He has deserved this.
But what did he do to get it?
He played 12 years, blood, sweat, and tears with those guys as teammates.
A lot of people play 12 years. They don't get a championship.
Now let me bring this one up. 844-204-RICH if you want to discuss it. Because we got a Smoltz, Mattingly. I'd love to ask these guys later on the show about this. When we were doing our podcast years ago, okay, we had in our studio Michael Crabtree, okay, of the San Francisco 49ers. Anquan Boldin had just joined the 49ers from the Ravens.
Right.
That guy over there, Brockman, you asked Michael Crabtree.
I did.
Are you going to look just to see Anquan Boldin's ring?
For motivation.
And how did he answer that question?
Not too kindly.
As if he had three heads. Well, why would I want to see that ring? For motivation. What is that? He didn't want to see that ring in his locker room. In the same way that I'm sure the Warriors don't want any piece of Varejao's Cleveland pride. And he can't do that.
I think it's a little different situation.
But he was also there for he'd been there before also. It wasn't like he was just there for a few weeks. He has a lot of history in Cleveland. He was
lost
part of
2 championships.
Yeah,
in Cleveland.
he was part of going to the finals with them a couple times. He's just there's a big backstory. This isn't a guy who was there on a 10-day contract.
He has given an indication he will not take the ring.
He has said he will not accept it.
I give him credit, and guess what? He's going to get a ring next year because he's on the Warriors and they just signed Durant. So take that ring that you played for the whole year.
How about you say you didn't take it and kind of quietly take it anyway?
Or that's
probably what
that's what Varejao does. He should flop. He should flop and say, I don't want it, but take it. Yep. Do a total flop. He's great at that. In fact, I do believe Varejao in Portuguese means flop, doesn't it?
I think so.
His name is Anderson Flop in his own nation. So let us discuss what is going on with the Jets.
Right.
And Fitzpatrick. I believe this thing's going deep into the preseason.
Yeah.
But the only way for Fitzpatrick to get any leverage back at all, to get more money or whatever respect he feels he deserves, and that obviously his teammates feel that he deserves, is to just say, all right, you think this can go down without me being paid what I'm properly needing to be paid? Have at it. There's Geno Smith, who got Rex fired, or we shouldn't say that, but his play didn't help Rex's cause until, of course, it was week 17, and then he had a perfect passer rating that ruined the Jets draft pick. But that's neither here nor there. I need to get out of that. What do you think's going to happen?
Well, here's your problem. Your problem is that at the beginning of the offseason, they said to Fitz, here's how much we think you're worth, and we don't think that you're going to be able to match this money plus the playing time we're going to give you as a starting quarterback here. And they were right. And so there's no motivation for the Jets to move other than our season could be screwed. So what you're saying, on paper, that looks correct. But the Jets know this too. So I think the next checkpoint in all of this is the start of training camp. And there's a compromise there. The problem I think that they run into with Fitz is it's hard to welcome the guy back into your locker room as the starting quarterback, right? The guy who set franchise records last year, coming in with his tail between his legs, which he almost would have. Like, you have to give him some sort of sweetener. And I still think that there is a middle ground there where you do a one-year deal, you start at your number, which is $8 million, and you say, if you get us to the playoffs and you're the starting quarterback, then we'll go to your number, which is $12 million. To me, that's the easiest way to fix this because you give him an opportunity to get back to his number. He can take some pride in the fact that I didn't completely get beaten down by the franchise. Whether or not he'd be willing to accept that, to me, that's the logical place because the reason, one of the things the Jets are saying here is, well, you did a great job for us, but you've never been to the playoffs. You already got your big second contract when you were in Buffalo. Right now, you're the league sees you as the type of quarterback that you can tread water with. He wants to be paid a little closer to what a franchise quarterback gets paid. Mm-hmm. And so they're asking, well, all right, if you get to the playoffs, we'll pay you closer to that.
I'm just trying to figure out, having done this football only thing with the network for 13 years and you covering it as long, have we ever had a situation like this where a starting quarterback for a team that had won multiple double-digit wins a year before has a playoff caliber team with an opportunity like in front of them where the best team in the division will be without their starting quarterback for a quarter of the season. And here we are on the cusp of training camp and the guy's unsigned. Have we ever seen anything
I think the closest thing is quarterbacks going into contract years. Happened with Drew Brees in San Diego after they drafted Phillip Rivers, Joe Flacco in Baltimore, Kirk Cousins this year in Washington, where a team has substantial uncertainty at the position going forward. I just can't remember there being uncertainty about the season that you're actually in like this. And I think part of it depends on how you see the Jets, too. Like, are they, because Brandon Marshall and Eric Decker and Matt Forte and Nick Mangold and Darrelle Revis and, David Harris, because all of those guys are in the back end of their primes, are you in a window of opportunity where you can win a championship? I don't think internally the Jets think that they're there yet. And that's part of the logic here, too, is that I think they're quietly trying to do what Carolina did under Dave Gettleman, where they're quietly rebuilding the roster underneath that layer of veteran players. And if you're in that situation, you aren't going to do things to mortgage your future.
But getting the guy in
to 9 or 10 or 11 wins.
Getting the guy in, though, would be a good start.
It would be.
I'm here with Albert Breer. And so the Cousins situation is a different situation entirely, even though you do say some similarities in the fact that it seems both sides agree, let's just do this 1 year at a time right now. Is that as hunky-dory as it seems?
It was, honestly, he signed his tender almost right away. Right away. Was part of the offseason program. Did a good job through April and May and June, as he has over the course of the rest of his career. Came in there as the starting quarterback in the spring for the first time. So that's significant, too. It basically boils down to what that franchise tag number is, which is $20 million. They weren't going to accept anything less than $44 million over the first 2 years of any deal, because that's the cost of 2 franchise tags. The Redskins, as much as they love him, weren't willing to go there yet. They said, we need to see more. They tried a couple weeks ago to go back to the negotiating table, find some kind of compromise, but there's just, the divide there is too big. Now, if he goes in and kills it, Andrew Luck's at $25 million a year right now, right? Mm-hmm. That's an outlier. But what happens if Derek Carr gets paid after this year? What happens if Blake Bortles gets paid after this year? So that's the risk the Redskins run, is if he comes in and kills it, they get back to the playoffs. Now, all of a sudden, you could be looking at the quarterback market changing again, where the idea of paying a Kirk Cousins $22, $23, $24 million a year takes on a different complexion.
Albert Breer of the MMQB.com. Let's take a break. We'll come back in a minute's time. We'll talk about Arian Foster signing with the Miami Dolphins yesterday, Peanut Tillman's Hall of Fame resume, and what happens to the guys who did not get long-term deals staring at a franchise tag tender that's right in front of them, and so much more. Albert Breer here on The Rich Eisen Show. John Smoltz, Don Mattingly, and Travis Kelce all still to come on this 3-hour show. Charles Peanut Tillman winning the Walter Payton Man of the Year award at the NFL Honors in 2013. Albert Breer joining me here on The Rich Eisen Show. A second-round pick in the 2003 draft out of Louisiana Lafayette, who then went on to have 44 career forced fumbles. Now, I know that's not usually the stat that gets thrown out there when you're talking about gold jackets and busts in Canton. But isn't that, for a cornerback, takeaways? That's what it is. And normally you're talking about picks, but the guy was a forced fumble machine. He's the only defensive back in the top 10 of forced fumbles since 2003, nearly double from the next closest, who is definitely a first ballot Hall of Famer, in Charles Woodson. Do you think Peanut Tillman will be up for conversation?
I think the problem that he has is how hard it is for defensive backs to get in. I think there are 24 defensive backs in the Hall of Fame right now. A guy like Ty Law can't get in. And we saw what he did on the biggest stage. You look at the AFC Championship game against the Colts, what he did in the Super Bowl against the Rams all those years ago, was a true shutdown corner. And I think that's the important point there, is the problem that Peanut's going to have is that he's got that tag of being a cover 2 corner, which is almost like it's like a dirty word for
system.
Yeah,
a system player.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's kind of the issue that he's going to wind up having, is that
isn't Kevin Green technically a system player too, right?
Yeah, you can make that argument because
everybody's a system
outside
player.
linebacker in Pittsburgh and all of that. I mean, here's the thing. Like, okay, so is he Champ Bailey? Is he Darrelle Revis? Is he even Ty Law? Is he Charles Woodson? Okay, so there are 4 guys who I think have a very good case to get in. I think Revis is probably a lock. I think Bailey's probably a lock. I think Woodson's probably a lock, and Law isn't able to get in, right? If Peanut's below those guys and you only have 24 defensive backs in the Hall of Fame total, he's a great player. He's obviously a great guy. I mean, we've seen that part of it, right? I think that he's going to be one of these guys that kind of, when you compare him against other defensive backs and you look at the raw number of DBs that are in there, it's going to be tough for him.
Albert Breer from the MMQB.com right here in the Rich Eisen Show. How does Arian Foster fit in to the Adam Gase offense being brought to South Florida?
I think part of this is that you struck out on C.J. Anderson. You know, they signed him to the offer sheet. They weren't able to get him in there. You know, so now, Gase is still looking for a tailback to kind of hold the fort. They've got the young guy, Jay Ajayi, in there. And, to me, this is a guy who you put in that room. You hope that he can be good for the other young guys in that room, and you just pray that he stays healthy. He wasn't great at the beginning of last year before he got hurt, but he's been on the shelf so much. And you look at his age. I just don't think you can count on a guy like that at this point for much more than depth. And if you ask people in the Texans building, they'll tell you can't get around the corner the same way he used to be able to. So there are some things that he's lost. I just think it's one of those things where it's, you add some depth, you put a veteran in that corner of the locker room, and you just hope that he can find a way to stay healthy where he hasn't over the last few years.
It's interesting the Dolphins and Texans swapped running backs because Lamar Miller's sitting there in Houston right now. And the question, though, is when you see that, right? Yeah. You see Arian Foster joining Adam Gase, who everybody says is is going to account for at least a couple of W's just because of what he's bringing out.
Right.
So, honestly, that's what I'm hearing, and I'm sure a coach would blanch upon hearing that.
And Jay Cutler and Peyton Manning will probably tell you that too.
How much he means to just being there and his attitude as well as his confidence, et cetera, et cetera. Could the Dolphins be one of the teams we're not talking about? Because right now the bandwagon's filled in Oakland. Yeah. We had Allen Robinson of the Jacksonville Jaguars in here. What was it, last week, right, guys? And so people are talking Jacksonville. Who do you think is a surprise team? Could the Dolphins be one?
I actually thought about this. Now, the Dolphins could be if Tannehill. I mean, the young receivers they have.
That's a big if. By the way, but he should change his name from Ryan Tannehill to If Tannehill. Because that's everyone says If Tannehill is the way everything just starts with the Dolphins.
But I think you go down the list of guys that Gase has worked with, right? And you see Tim Tebow in Denver. He was part of that.
Tebow time.
Retrofitting that offense to make it work for Tim Tebow.
Retrofit.
Right. Then goes back. Yeah. Peyton Manning had his 55 touchdown season in Gase's first year as OC there. And Jay Cutler loved the work that he did with Gase last year. So I think the quarterback's naturally going to be better. I'm actually going to go to Gase's old home, though, where I think that there could be a jump. I think the Bears, based on how they played at the beginning of last year, I think the talent deficit wound up getting them in the end. But I think Ryan Pace has done a nice job of stacking that roster. And if you look at I can't remember the last time Cutler had an offensive staff that he believed in for consecutive years. Now they lose Gase, but he's got a close relationship with Dow Loggins, their new OC. That goes all the way back to when Cutler was at Vanderbilt. So I think there's a level of trust there that, I mean, quite frankly, I don't think Cutler's had in back-to-back years with offensive coaches in quite some time. You've got Alshon Jeffrey, who is going to be motivated to go get a contract, right? You've got Kevin White, who I was told, that the Cutler is told people privately he's never seen a receiver physically who can do the things that Kevin White can.
Well, we haven't either because he hasn't done it.
And we
yet.
haven't seen him yet. But you're basically your first round pick from 2015 coming off of a red shirt.
Yep.
Then you get Leonard Floyd. You add him to the defense. I think Vic Fangio is a heck of a defensive coordinator.
And I love Fox. You know, Fox.
And I think Fox, yeah. I mean, like, if you look at Fox's second year in Carolina, they go to the Super Bowl. Second year in Denver, 13-3? Mm-hmm. I think that there's an opportunity for the Bears to bounce there based on how they started last year and because I think the talent's a little better than it was.
So what do you think of Jeffrey? He's one of those guys who has to sign a tender here. Are we going to have a problem, Barry, in Kansas City?
Yeah.
Are we going to, or Jeffrey in Chicago?
Jeffrey to me is
think?
like, I think a lot of what Jeffrey's going to depend on Kevin White. You know, like if Kevin White,
what I mean, are we going to have guys just saying, I'm not signing my tender here? What do you think?
No one's going to sit out when it counts.
Okay.
No one's going to sit out when it counts. I think maybe you miss a few weeks of camp to make a statement or mitigate injury risk or whatever it is.
Because that's the conversation people are having is at some point somebody's going to make this stand to get rid of the franchise tag, which people every single year bring up now.
You need to be a big-time player to do that.
Well, it's not just it's the players who are going to have to do that. It's them collectively when the chips are down in a collective bargaining season, deciding what is worth pushing the nuclear winter button or threatening to do it or not. And people keep putting the franchise tag in that silo or what's going on with Brady and the commissioner's powers in that silo.
Right.
And I'm just wondering if that, I had this conversation with Schefter last week. I mean, you know the tea leaves of what's going on with the Players Association as well. Do you think that's a possibility here?
Well, I'll start with the idea of guys holding out. It just hasn't happened. I mean, Cam Chancellor, when he carried his holdout into the season last year, he was the first player in the new collective bargaining agreement to carry a holdout into the season. It just flat out doesn't happen. I think when you look at these two things, when you look at Article 46 and the way it's affected Brady, and
that's the commissioner's powers.
Yeah, and the franchise tag. When you go back to 2011, and God knows I was there every day. When you go back to 2011, those were two things that the owners were not willing to budge on. And what the players would have had to give up to get those things back would have been enormous. And so they looked at it as what percentage of players does the franchise tag affect? Pretty low, right?
Yeah.
Pretty low.
Infinitesimal.
And then Article 46.
Even fewer.
And who was it normally affecting? We were thinking of guys who were getting DUIs, who were getting busted with weed. Those are the guys that we were associated with Article 46 until this Tom Brady thing came along, right? Mm-hmm. So now the Brady thing comes along, you look at it, and it's a little different. I just think that those things, when you look at those things, it just affects such a small amount of players. Like the franchise tag, and I said this to you off air, it's just like max contracts in the NBA. Just like max contracts. So Kevin Durant and LeBron James can't be paid that way, can't be paid $50 or $60 million a year. Who benefits? Mike Connolly benefits. Okay, so Von Miller can't be paid $25 million a year. Who benefits? Malik Jackson benefits, right? Mm-hmm. So I just think that the way the system's set up,
interesting.
It's the second-tier players are getting paid there. And with Article 46, it was never, I don't think that it was anybody's thought process that someone like Tom Brady, 15 years, pristine behavior, off the field, like one of the golden children in the NFL, that it would ever apply to someone like that.
By the way, and you laugh when he said he was there every day. He was the man on the
there.
Hold on a minute. You Breer, you were the man on the street corner in front of the
with
NFL
my lawn chair
in Washington, D.C., going through rainstorms and 90-degree weather, 100-degree weather. You were there every single day, and I was the one sitting in the L.A. studio on NFL Network. Back and forth with you, basically saying, tell me something good. Tell me something good. But you were wired into what that building was.
But and we all remember what that was like, right? Like everybody was praying for football. Like, just give us the season when the ugly truth here is with some of this stuff, if the players really want to get the owner's attention, you know what you do? You miss games.
I know, but it came down to it where, if you remember, it was last T's about to be crossed and I's dotted. It came down to Article 46.
Yep.
And the players basically said, let's take a vote on it. If I'm not mistaken, the Steelers said, let's push the button over Article 46. Right. And everybody else said no. Everyone's like, let's just sign this thing. Let's play football.
Because the Steelers have been hit by it.
I know.
They've been hit by it.
Absolutely. Albert, thanks for coming in person.
Absolutely.
Thanks for letting us know you're here in Southern California. Good to see you, sir.
You too.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern on Audience.